When Becky brought up divorce for the third time because of her first love, Jake, I agreed. But then, she hesitated. Are you sure about this? This ISN /TA joke. She furrowed her brows and checked with me again. Looking at her familiar face, I smiled softly, finally at peace. I'm sure. Let's get a divorce. Becky stared at my signature for what felt like forever. Are you really sure? Her voice was heavy, emotions swirling in her eyes. This isn't a joke. Don't sign it and then back out later. I don't have time for games. She always wore that face. Like she hadn't smiled at me since we got married. It made sense, I guess. There was a time when I clung to her, refusing to let go, but now? Now, I could let go. I calmly slipped off the wedding ring from my finger, placed it on the table, and smiled at her. I'm sure. Let's get a divorce. Becky's frown deepened. Robert, I'll ask you again. Are you sure? Her expression was cold, and I knew she was asking again just to warn me not to back out halfway. After all, from what I'd heard from Jake, once we divorced, they would be flying off to France to settle down. But seeing her so resolute, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. Because, if this were a few years ago, I'd never let go. But now? I could. Becky, I held her hand, calling her name one last time. Her eyes shifted slightly, and she opened her mouth, but before she could speak, she saw me taking off her wedding ring. Becky choked on her words. With a sense of finality, I tossed both wedding rings into the trash. 3 years ago, with so much passion, I had placed that ring on Becky's finger. Now, 3 years later, I was the one taking it off. This was the end of it all. We're done. I said. When I married Becky, I had no idea Jake even existed. I thought our meeting, our getting to know each other, and our journey together was all fate. But after we got married, Jake appeared, and I realized how foolish I had been. I/V heard so much about you from Becky, Jake said, casually walking up to me. We're so alike, and now that I'm finally back from France, I just had to meet you. Jake greeted me like we were old friends. Hi, I'm Jake, Becky's friend. Thanks for taking care of her all these years. I froze. He went on, saying things that sounded like a territorial claim. He even didn't notice when he gripped my hand so hard that it turned red. Becky warmly greeted Jake, handing him a cup of coffee. While taking it, Jake casually placed his hand on Becky's. Even though she quickly pulled it back, I saw everything. It's been years, but you still remember what kind of coffee I like. You mentioned it on one of our trips. You said this one was good. I've remembered ever since. They exchanged words about their past. A past that only belonged to them. I stood at the door, feeling completely out of place. Suddenly, it hit me, my marriage was in crisis. That night, I had my first argument with Becky. She couldn't understand my unease. She called it an overreaction on my part. My anger grew. I grabbed her wrist and demanded, "You and Jake are childhood sweethearts, each other's first love. You've kissed, you've dated. Why didn't you tell me about this? Why hide it from me? Becky, what am I to you?" Becky brushed my hand off with irritation. She couldn't even be bothered to give me an explanation. Instead, with an indifferent attitude, she dismissively said, "Robert, if I wanted anything to happen with Jake, it would have by now. Don't be so sensitive, okay? I should have seen it coming. My marriage with Becky was never going to last. But I kept hoping that if I could just delay it one more day, maybe things would change. I loved her. I really did. Loved her so deeply that I couldn't see a way out. If I lost her, I wasn't sure what kind of person I'd become. But now it seemed like I had been fooling myself. Maybe I didn't love her enough? Or maybe, finally, I was able to see clearly she wasn't worth holding on to anymore. In the end, if I had understood that sometimes it's better to end the pain quickly than drag it out, I would have done this much sooner. Becky's face was pale, a little hurt. Maybe she felt that it was embarrassing for me to be the one to end things. But honestly, I didn't care why anymore. It didn't matter. You let me know when you're ready to go to court, and it'll clear my schedule, I said, turning to walk away. But Becky rushed out and stopped me. Robert, what game are you playing now? You see, even now, at the very end, she still thought I had some hidden agenda. But what could I possibly want? I just wanted to let her go. And let myself go. I sighed and shrugged off her hand. Don't worry. This time I'm serious. After the divorce, I won't bother you and Jake. And if you really plan on moving to France, I'm not going to follow you all the way there over something so trivial. France? What? Becky looked confused. I wasn't sure if she was just too excited about the divorce to remember the part about France, or if she was pretending. But I didn't care enough to explain. Becky, just go home. I motioned for her to leave. I'm heading go home. Becky stared at me. Her eyes swollen and red. Why do you suddenly agree this time? She asked. Tired, I said flatly. Just because of that dinner? That dinner? I was surprised she even remembered. If it weren't for that dinner, Becky wouldn't have kept bringing up divorce. But the thing is, I was the victim in all of this. I woke up early to buy groceries, all excited to prepare a candlelit dinner. On our anniversary, a romantic evening, I planned to gift her a necklace and put it on her. What did I do wrong? I worked hard for this moment, eager and full of anticipation. And in the end, all I got was a text from her, Jake has a fever. I'm taking him to the hospital for an 4. I won't be home tonight. What a waste. I stared at the untouched food on the table, unable to understand what I lacked compared to Jake. My phone buzzed, a message from a friend. Happy anniversary. I know you're having a candlelight dinner, so you might not see this, but I'm still wishing you the best. That message, with me sitting alone at the table, was pure irony. The next day, Becky returned. She looked at the table full of food, then paused. Before scolding me. I told you not to wait for me. Why make all this food if no one's eating it? Such a waste. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I finally snapped. We argued fiercely, and for the first time in our marriage, I used curse words during an argument. Becky slapped me across the face in anger. It's just one meal. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? I don't know what's so funny about this. You should have some boundaries. I didn't want to hear another word from her. Isn't it obvious? You want to get back with Jake. What are you pretending for? Robert. Are you out of your mind? Becky yelled at me. We both went silent. I shut my mouth, planning to calm down before talking to Becky about it again. But then, she suddenly spoke. Yeah, I do want to get back with Jake. Are you happy now? Jake is better looking than you, richer than you, more cultured than you, and more generous than you. And I've only ever loved him. Are you happy now? Familiar people know exactly where to strike to hurt the most. It was as though I were being led to the execution platform, with Becky's words tearing at my soul, over and over again. This isn't worth it. She said. Becky had exhausted herself with anger, her voice now hoarse and distant as she looked at me coldly. A single meal and we end up fighting like this. I'm really tired. Let's just get a divorce, she said finally. In the end, she blamed everything on that dinner. But she didn't understand. It wasn't about that meal at all. Since that night, Becky had handed me the divorce papers twice. Each time, she gave them to me with a mocking tone, saying, "Robert, we got here because of you. We're just not right for each other. Maybe it was a mistake from the start. If I had known you were the kind of person who'd start a huge fight over a meal, I never would have married you." As if it all started with that one meal. Now, once again, Becky was bringing it up. Just because of that meal? She asked again when I didn't respond, as if she wouldn't let it go until I answered. But what would it matter? Even if I explained everything, she wouldn't listen. Her heart had never been with me. For us. Whether it was about that meal or not didn't really matter anymore. Maybe at times like this, when parting ways, people always need something to blame on the other. "Yeah, just because of that meal," I said, smiling as I agreed with her. Becky stood there, frozen. I had no idea what she wanted to say. All I could tell was that her lips moved slightly, but she still didn't speak. We just stood there, looking at each other for what seemed like forever. Finally, she spoke. "You can stay. The house is yours anyway." She started packing her things. "I'm going to move in with Jake. We'll go to court tomorrow." When I heard her say this, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had been wondering if I'd still feel anger or pain when she mentioned Jake again. But thankfully, I felt nothing. "All right. What time tomorrow?" I asked. Becky froze, her hands halting in midair as she packed. She stood there for a few seconds, and then, in frustration, she slammed her suitcase onto the floor. She looked at me, like she was questioning me. Maybe even accusing me. Her gaze was full of mixed emotions, buried under a thin layer of ice. I couldn't read it. 9 a.m., she replied, her eyes never leaving me. 90 /clock, right when the courthouse opens. She was in such a hurry to divorce me. I couldn't help but bitterly smile. It wasn't because I'd miss her. It was because it wasn't worth it. All the effort I'd put into this marriage, all the pain I'd endured for the past 3 years, felt utterly pointless. "Okay. See you at the courthouse tomorrow," I nodded, then added, "Do you need me to call Jake, so he can pick you up?" "Robert." Becky hesitated. She bit her lip and continued, "In fact, we have come to this point today because..." "Is it all my fault?" I asked first. She looked surprised by my words and shook her head. "No," I was going to say. "You said it 3 years ago," I cut her off again, offering a bitter laugh. "I never responded then, but now that we're getting divorced, I think I deserve to defend myself one last time." I spoke calmly, as though talking about someone else's problems, as if they were nothing more than jokes. I said, "It's not my fault. Becky. You were the one who let go of my hand first. And now, I'm letting go too. I hope that after the divorce, we never have to see each other again." Jake drove over to pick up Becky. It was me who called him. Even Becky didn't know about it. Before leaving, she waved at me one last time. "Robert, I'm leaving." "I won't see you off," I replied. "So, I'm really going now?" "Yeah," I said, a bit impatient. For the 3rd time, she waved, and I blocked her path at the door. "Go ahead." She lowered her head, looking down, defeated. Jake, ever the considerate one, helped her carry the luggage to the car. She kept glancing back at me, 3 steps, then a glance. I simply closed the door. As the door clicked shut, I saw her looking back, reluctant to leave. I, however, turned and walked away, without even a glance back. That night, I slept soundly. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest, a stone that had been pressing on me for so long, finally moved. I could breathe again. The next morning, I dressed more formally than usual. I was heading to a ceremony that had been delayed by 3 years. Becky, accompanied by Jake, walked through the courthouse doors. I stood there alone, but I didn't feel lonely. In fact, I felt clear-headed, as though I were on the verge of a fresh start. There weren't many people at the courthouse in the morning, and Becky and I quickly went through the process. Afterwards, we walked out of the courthouse, one after the other. Becky was silent, her face devoid of emotion. Jake stood beside her, fussing over her well-being, but she ignored him, as though his words were just noise in the background. I was about to head to a nearby restaurant for a bite to eat when I noticed a woman walking toward me. She had a figure to match her beauty and gave me a smile. For a moment, my mind went blank as a familiar image surfaced from my memory. She stepped up to me, took off her sunglasses, and gave a glance behind her at Becky. She scoffed, then looked back at me, saying, "I guess I caught your divorce. Robert, congrats on the divorce. Let me take you out to eat." Selena*'s appearance was a complete surprise. When I thought about it, it had been a long time since we last saw each other. The last time must have been on my wedding day. I still remembered it clearly. The night before the wedding, Nate had called me, saying Selena was drunk at our regular restaurant. I asked what happened, and Nate sighed before handing the phone to Selena, telling her to explain herself. Drunk, Selena picked up the phone and slurred, "Robert, congrats on the wedding." I asked, "How much did you drink? Will you be able to wake up tomorrow to be my bridesmaid?" There was a pause on the other end. Then Selena hummed a few times and mumbled, "You're getting married. I'm happy. So happy." Her voice sounded strange, thick and muffled. Maybe she was coming down with a cold. I sighed. "Even if you're happy, you shouldn't drink this much. It's bad for your stomach." "I'm happy because of you," she replied, trailing off. I wanted to say more, but then Nate's voice came through, saying Selena had fallen asleep. He assured me not to worry, he had already called her brother Pete. The next day, Selena was at my wedding, as if nothing had happened. She looked radiant, full of energy. And her smile was bright. The drunken Selena from the night before seemed like a bad dream. Selena took charge of everything at the wedding. She greeted guests, ensured everything went smoothly, and handled all the details. The ceremony was flawless, thanks to her. Even Becky couldn't help but say, "Selena is so thoughtful, it's like she's getting married herself." Nate just shook his head meaningfully. "Of course, she's thoughtful. But being thoughtful doesn't always mean she's happy." I didn't understand what Nate meant by that. Before I could ask, Selena quickly changed the subject, talking about wedding details and reassuring me not to be nervous. She looked at me with the most sincere expression and wished me happiness for life. After the wedding, before I had even taken off my tuxedo, Selena rushed off to study abroad. Pete explained to me that she was going to continue her studies overseas. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. I guessed she didn't /see it, so I left another message, "Why are you in such a hurry to leave? You wanted us to have a good meal together." She didn't reply until late that night. "Well, catch up sometime in the future." Time passed. And Selena stayed abroad, never coming back. Nate was busy with work and family matters. As for me, I had been broken by my relationship, physically and emotionally exhausted. The promise we made was long overdue, and it had never been fulfilled. When we reunited, I was caught off guard. What /s wrong? It /s only been 3 years, you haven't /t forgotten me, have you? Selena teased, poking my chest with her finger and pretending to be upset. That's really mean of you. It took me a moment to respond. When did you get back? Why didn't you let me know in advance? I could /v picked you up with Nate at the airport. Selena seemed pleased with my response and even joked, if you / not too much trouble, I could take a taxi to the airport, and you can pick me up all over again. I couldn't help but laugh. By the way, what brings you here? I asked. I'd only shared the divorce news with Nate, so I was curious how she knew. Didn't I say it's a coincidence? Selena shrugged nonchalantly, flipping her hair. We're just meant to cross paths. Becky shot a wary glance at Selena. She didn't speak, but I could clearly see the hostility in her eyes. Jake's phone rang. And he walked off to answer it. Becky continued to stare at Selena and me, unblinking. How long do you plan to stay this time? I asked Selena, call Nate out, we can have a good time together. You don't have to tell me, I arranged everything. Selena pulled me away from Becky. I told Nate that we going to his house for dinner tonight. But you have to accompany me to have breakfast first. Robert doesn't even want to go, why are you dragging him along? Becky suddenly interrupted. The surrounding air went still. Selena and I both turned to look at Becky. Even Jake, still on the phone, glanced over at the commotion. Becky seemed embarrassed and quickly turned her head, avoiding my gaze. Selena didn't back down, she faced her directly. You're quite the busybody. You're divorced, but you're still telling people what to do. Hey, Becky, who do you think you are? Selena's mocking laughter left Becky visibly insulted. We won't be officially divorced until 20 days from now. Becky hissed through gritted teeth. Becky made a point, but did 20 days really matter? She had already said, during our arguments, you think you so important? If it weren't for the divorce paperwork, I would have left with Jake already. If anything, she seemed even more eager to get that divorce certificate than I was. Oh, you mean you don't plan to divorce? Then ask the person who is on the phone next to you, whether he agrees? Selena asked again. She stopped me and continued, it's funny. We are all women, why are you pretending in front of me? Selena's words always came with a sharp edge. I used to warn her, telling her to watch her mouth, that not everyone saw her as a princess, and she should be careful, or she'd get burned one day. But Selena always brushed it off, smirking as she patted her chest. I don't start things, but if someone steps on me, I'll make sure they regret it. Nate, who had been quietly watching, squinted and laughed, being a woman is the best. We men can't be as straightforward as that, we have too many things to consider. 3 years had passed, and she still hadn't changed. After Selena finished her rant, she stole a glance at me. She knew I didn't like it when she acted like this. But today, for the first time, I didn't mind. In fact, I almost enjoyed it. It felt like in life. Everyone had their labels. Men had to be patient with women. Men had to be magnanimous. I had tried so hard to keep my rationality intact through the wreckage of my failed marriage. But it was exhausting. I had been shackled by all kinds of expectations. I was trapped, suffocating, unable to speak. Now, someone was standing up for me, giving voice to my frustrations, setting the record straight. And that felt good. Jake finished his call and walked over to Becky. Clearly, he had heard the argument between her and Selena, but he chose to ignore it. He spoke to Becky, Becky. There some urgent business at the company, so I have to leave. I can drive you. What did you say? Becky stared at Jake in disbelief. But Jake didn't give her a chance to react. He quickly turned and ran off. Oh no, your husband divorced you, and now even the lover's running away, Selena said, feigning surprise and covering her mouth with one hand. You're so pitiful. Becky's face turned crimson with anger. I had never seen her so humiliated. In the past, it was always her making me uncomfortable, throwing tantrums at inappropriate moments, complaining about my family at gatherings, or criticizing me in front of my friends. I never once complained. But now, I didn't have to put up with it anymore. Selena, don't think I don't know what you're really thinking. Becky's veins popped, and she snapped angrily. Wow, you can read minds? You're so cautious around me, what do you think I'm thinking right now? Am I planning to slap you to vent my frustration, or maybe try to win over your ex-husband? Selena shot back, even leaning in provocatively toward me. You. Becky was furious. What? You think cheating is okay? You're still arguing about this? Do you honestly think that after all this, you're still entitled to any dignity? Selena retorted. Crazy. Becky shouted, her voice shaking with anger. Becky, calm down. No need for insults. I firmly warned. Becky stared at me in shock. But she just insulted me, I didn't hear it before, but I heard it now, I interrupted. Becky fell silent. Selena grinned with satisfaction. She leaned her head on my shoulder and rolled her eyes at Becky. Looks like you asked for it. Serves you right. Having had enough of the argument, I told Selena I'd take her out to eat and we left. Before we left, Selena glanced back and warned Becky, Robert's a nice guy, and he prefers to let things slide, but I'm different. Becky, don't bother him anymore. Or you'll regret it. Becky glared at me. Almost as if expecting me to say something on her behalf. But I didn't. She was alone, stood at the door, watching our car drive off. Just like when I had arrived, I was alone. That evening, Selena and I arrived at Nate's house for dinner as planned. His wife, Sherry, greeted us warmly, and Selena made sure to bring gifts for everyone. Nate put my favorite dish in my bowl and joked, "Here, your favorite. Don't say I took too much this time." Selena winked, "Robert still prefers lighter food, right?" Nate chuckled, "What are you talking about, Selena? We've gone out to eat so many times. And Robert likes his food light. If it's too greasy, he gets an upset stomach. Don't you remember?" Then why did Becky act all serious, saying Robert doesn't like light food, like she knows him so well? Selena scratched her head. I thought Robert's taste really changed. You don't know, I felt so guilty when I argued with Becky this morning. Selena finished speaking, but there was an uncomfortable silence. Nate coughed twice, subtly signaling Selena to stop talking. I understood Nate's good intentions. Becky loved spicy food and often complained when my food was too bland. She'd even throw it away if the flavor was too mild. After we got married, I abandoned all my old food preferences to match hers, eating spicy food with her. Maybe after all this time, she forgot that I had changed my eating habits for her. The truth was, I didn't like spicy food. I was even mildly allergic to chili peppers. But she never knew that. She never cared. After 3 rounds of drinks, Selena was completely drunk. Nate and I tried to stop her from drinking more, but she just waved us off, laughing, "You got divorced, I'm happy. I'm drinking, I'm happy. Seeing you happy, I'm happy." It was just like when I got married 3 years ago. I couldn't help but shake my head as I poured her a glass of water to sober up. "You were happy when I got married, and now you're happy I'm divorced?" Selena didn't answer, just kept laughing. She wasn't really happy before, now she's genuinely happy. Nate's wife Sherry suddenly chimed in. She cleaned up the table, then said, "You've all eaten enough. It's getting late. Robert, you take Selena home. Nate and I will clean up." "Okay." I got up to help Selena, but Nate moved over to assist as well. Sherry slapped his hand away. "Selena's got Robert. Don't meddle, come help me clean up." Nate rubbed his hands together. Well, then I'll just walk them out. Sherry pushed Nate toward the kitchen. Save it, you have no sense at all. Nate and I exchanged an awkward glance and both forced a smile. Sherry walked me to the door and gave me a pat on the shoulder. Drive carefully, be safe on the road. Got it. I took Selena home, where her brother Pete was waiting outside. When he saw Selena in such a drunken state, he didn't ask a single question. He just took her from me and then asked if I wanted to come in for a bit. I waved my hand to decline, exchanged a few pleasantries, and went back home. The next day, someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find Becky standing there. What's up? I asked. I left something behind, I came to pick it up. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked a couple of steps, then suddenly froze. You're not keeping them anymore? Becky looked down, her fingers clenching so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I followed her gaze. It was the stuff I had thrown away in the trash. Most of it carried memories of us. But I didn't need any of it anymore. Yeah, not anymore. I cleaned up a bit this morning, the house feels much cleaner now, I said. Becky stood frozen with her back to me. Her shoulders stiffened for a moment. She didn't say anything, just stood there motionless. After a long while, she slowly crouched down and started pulling the items out of the trash. One by one. There was the bracelet we exchanged when we first started dating, the crafts we made on dates, the confession card she drunkenly drew for me on our wedding night, and the little ornaments I bought according to her preferences. All these things that once felt like treasures to me were now worthless. It was almost laughable when I thought about it. I put all my energy into maintaining this relationship, but the result was still not as good as the look they gave each other when they met again. I felt like a gambler who had lost everything. You don't want them. Just give them to me. Becky turned her head, looking at me with a forced, ugly smile. Is that okay? This version of Becky wasn't what you'd call attractive. In fact, she looked somewhat pathetic. Maybe she realized how strange her smile was because she stopped pretending to smile and went back to rummaging through the things she'd just taken out of the trash. If you want them, take them. It'll save me the trouble of throwing them away, I said, my tone flat. Becky looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears. You really not keeping them? She asked again. I shrugged. What's wrong? Changed your mind? If you're not taking them, I'll just throw them out when I take the trash later. No, I want them all. Could you help me find a bag so I can pack them up and take them with me? There are trash bags under the table. Help yourself, I said, pointing casually before heading to the kitchen to continue cooking. A few moments later, I looked up to find Becky sitting on the stool, staring at me blankly. She looked, hollowed out, like someone had drained her soul. It was strange. I called her name twice, and she snapped back to reality, giving me an apologetic smile. I remember when you used to be in the kitchen all the time, trying so hard to make me happy. Watching you cook just now, it felt like we were back in those days. We were so happy then. Becky, I interrupted her, you came to pick up the stuff, did you get everything? She paused before answering, yeah, I got everything. There's nothing left? Shouldn't be. Is there anything else? Becky hesitated before suddenly asking, do you mind if I stay for dinner? I looked at the light dishes on the table. Confused. These weren't the kind of foods she liked. Why would she stay and eat something she didn't even want, especially with someone she didn't like? Sorry, I only made enough for one, I said, firmly. Becky caught the hint that I was trying to usher her out. Sorry, did I cause trouble? She asked, her voice soft. Yes, I replied bluntly. She fell silent. You can leave now, I reminded her. Becky gave a bitter laugh, in such a hurry to get rid of me? I thought for a moment before answering, yes. She looked at me with a defeated, distant expression, studying me for a couple of seconds before finally gathering her things and turning to leave. Just as she reached the door, she suddenly turned back, as if she had made up her mind to say something. Actually, that day when I gave you the divorce papers, it wasn't. She didn't finish the sentence. And then, Selena showed up. What wasn't? Selena asked, walking up to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. Becky frowned, clearly annoyed. What are you doing here? Selena rolled her eyes, really funny. What about you? What are you doing here? You. The universe just doesn't want us to get along. Becky snapped back. The two of them traded barbs, neither one backing down. After a moment, Becky seemed to give up, said goodbye to me, and left. Selena sat down on a chair, looking at me with a curious expression. Why are you eating so early? Pete even asked you to come over to my place for dinner. I smiled. Want to try some? Sure. Selena rested her chin on her hand, grinning. It's been a while since I had a taste of your cooking. I set another set of utensils down for her. Selena dug in with gusto. Wow, your cooking's amazing. Whoever marries you will definitely eat well, she said between bites. Selena was never one to hold back compliments. When I faced setbacks before, she would do the same, always lifting me up by pointing out my strengths, reminding me not to give up. Being with her always felt so comfortable. You might be right, but for now, you're the lucky one, I joked, smiling at her. Selena's eyes squinted into crescent shapes. I want to enjoy good food in the future. How about this, I/LL marry you? She propped her chin up with both hands, looking up at me with playful eyes. You're looking for someone to remarry, right? And my family's been hounding me to get married, why don't we just get together? That way, I'll have someone to feed me every day. Her tone was teasing, the same as usual, but when our eyes met, I noticed her gaze was burning hot, more intense than any joke. I froze for a moment. Selena quickly looked away, laughing, though her laugh seemed a little forced. Just kidding. Did I scare you? Selena had a habit of biting her lip when she was lying. These small, unconscious gestures never fooled me. Even though she tried to force a smile, I could already see through her act. Why are you silent? Did I really scare you? Selena looked at me with concern. Sorry, I was just joking. Please don't /T be mad. And, even if we can /T be together, we /re still friends, right? I understood all too well, the feeling of compromising for someone was always painful. Selena kept smiling, but I could clearly see the faint redness in the corners of her eyes. Selena, stop, I said, reaching out as if to comfort her by patting her head. But my hand paused in midair, and I realized how inappropriate that would be. So I retracted it. Let /S talk about your time abroad. Tell me something that makes you happy. Selena stared at me for a long time before nodding. Okay. I spent a long time talking with her. From the sunrise in the east to the sunset in the west, from sunflowers to stars, we were lively and engaged, not feeling tired at all. After I sent Selena off, I sat on the sofa, thinking about what she had said during dinner. But I couldn't /T respond. I didn't know what role I was supposed to play in her life anymore. Selena was a great girl. But I couldn't just jump into another relationship right after ending one. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Over the next few days, I don't know if it was Selena who couldn't handle the delicate situation between us, but she decided not to bring up that day's events. I, too, tacitly followed her lead. It was as if we had never spoken about it, silently continuing our friendship, each of us aware of the invisible barrier between us. That was until the cooling-off period was over. And Becky and I went to the court to finalize our divorce. "Is there anything you want to say to me?" Becky asked as we approached the courthouse. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. "Robert, if you just say, Becky," I interrupted her, not letting her finish. "Let's get this done quickly. I'm meeting Nate and Selena for dinner later," I said. "Selena again?" Becky's tone turned agitated. "Yes," I nodded. "What's the problem?" Becky furrowed her brows. "Did you divorce me for Selena?" I smiled. "Did you forget? You were the one who brought up the divorce first. That was a mistake, a mistake. Can you really call something a mistake in a relationship? But I didn't want to delve into that issue right now. Whether it was intentional or not, it didn't matter. 3 times, she had brought up divorce, each time because of Jake. I was tired. Fed up. I agreed to divorce, both sides came to terms, it didn't really matter anymore. We've come this far. What's the point of saying more? I patted Becky on the back, urging her, "Let's go in. I'm in a hurry." "Robert, why do we have to do this?" Becky trailed off. "What do you mean? Are you trying to tell me that you still have feelings for me now?" I teased. Becky hesitated for a moment. Finally, she lowered her head, her voice a mere whisper. "Do I still have feelings for you?" How could I knew Becky's character well. She would never admit she was wrong, not even now. And honestly, that suited me just fine. It saved me from wasting any more words. "Then let's go," I said. It didn't take long for us to get the divorce certificate. From then on, Becky and I had no further ties to each other. Before we left, she couldn't help but stop me one last time. "If I hadn't given you those divorce documents, would you have still asked for the divorce?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. Becky paused for a moment before asking, "What if Jake hadn't come back?" We both knew the real reason behind our divorce was Jake's return. But we also understood that, even without Jake, there would have been someone else. Once there was a crack in the relationship, it could never be mended. I didn't answer Becky's question. It wasn't that I was avoiding it, but rather that it didn't feel necessary. Saying more wouldn't change anything. After parting ways with Becky, I went to meet Nate and Selena at our usual spot. However, Nate was unexpectedly called into work, leaving only Selena. When she saw me approaching, she gave a nervous smile. "Nate's not here. If it's inconvenient for you, we can reschedule." Selena was acting cautiously, almost tiptoeing around me. Not at all the carefree person she had been earlier. That's when I realized neither of us could pretend that nothing had happened between us. This forced me to confront the issue. "No need. It's fine. Just the two of us eating is good too." I sat across from her. Selena looked a little uneasy. "Selena," I called her name. She glanced up. "There's something I want to discuss with you." "You can say it." I hesitated for a moment, trying to figure out how to phrase it gently. After thinking for a while, I asked, "Am I your type?" "Ha." Selena spat out the water she had just taken a sip of. All eyes turned to us as she blushed, quickly wiping the spill off her clothes and the table. "Are you still half asleep?" "Why would you ask such a random question?" she stammered. I scratched my head, sorry, maybe I didn't phrase it well. Selena eyed me suspiciously, leaning in to ask, "Then what exactly are you trying to ask?" "You like me, don't you?" The second hand of the clock ticked silently as Selena paused, staring at me. She then pulled out her phone and dialed Nate. "This is bad, Robert's brain must have burned out." "What?" Nate's voice came through the phone, utterly confused. I calmly took Selena's phone from her. It's nothing. You can get back to work, I said, before hanging up. Selena reluctantly met my gaze. When did you know? She asked. A while ago, when you joked about marrying me. But at that time, I said I was joking, she trailed off. You bite your lip when you lie. Selena went silent for a couple of seconds. So, does this mean you're not even interested in being friends anymore? She asked. Her voice softening as she lowered her head and forced a bitter smile. I shouldn't have joked with you like that. At least then we could have remained friends. But now, I'm not sure we can even be that. She said those words in a way that almost sounded like a joke, but there was an unmistakable weight behind them. For some reason, seeing her like that made my heart tighten unexpectedly. I sighed. What are you thinking? You're overthinking things. Selena blinked, looking up at me. I do want to be honest with you, I said. But I never meant to cut ties with you. After everything that happened, it feels like you've been keeping your distance from me. Our relationship isn't like it used to be, and honestly, I paused, trying to find the right word. A bit lonely. You're not like before, talking all the time. I've kind of gotten used to it, but now I'm not sure how to handle the silence. Selena seemed taken aback, her eyes widening. Robert, I'm really sorry, I shook my head. No, listen. Selena, you're a great person. But I just came out of a failed relationship, it's okay. She said. Her voice rising with excitement. I'm willing to wait. Her eyes sparkled as if they held the stars themselves. For a moment, I wondered when exactly Selena had started liking me. If only it had been before I met Becky. But I thought to myself, maybe it's not too late, even starting from here. Once the metaphorical window was broken, our relationship slipped back into its old, carefree rhythm. A few days later, Becky suddenly called me, saying she was about to fly overseas with Jake and asked if we could meet one last time. I declined. Just one last time. She insisted. No need. Just open the door. I'm outside. I sighed in frustration as her knocking continued, and eventually, I gave in and opened the door. You finally agreed to see me, she said, her voice a mix of relief and something else I couldn't place. We've seen each other. Now go, I replied flatly, trying to close the door, but she blocked it with her body. Wait, she said, her voice faltering. What exactly do you want? I asked, irritation creeping into my tone. Becky hesitated for a moment, then handed me a cufflink. For a memento, she said softly. I used to collect cufflinks. But Becky never liked them. She thought it was a waste of money. I'd once gotten a very special cufflink from a friend who'd brought it from France. I had kept it carefully in its box. But on that particular day, Becky and Jake had gone out together, claiming it was for business. The weather suddenly turned, and Becky was caught in a downpour. When she returned home, drenched and angry, she saw the cufflink on my desk and exploded, accusing me of caring more about the cufflink than about her. She was furious that I hadn't noticed the rain and gone to pick her up. You care so much about that cufflink, why don't you just marry it instead of me? She yelled, then took the box and threw it out the window in a fit of rage. Looking at the exact same cufflink now, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Where did you get this? From a friend, she replied softly. I handed the cufflink back to her. Sorry, but I don't care about cufflinks anymore. You can keep it. Becky's face fell. She stared at me, clearly disheartened. Her hope was palpable, and it made my chest tighten a little, but I steeled myself. You don't like it? I can get you another one, pick any you want, she said, her voice tinged with anxiety. I waved her off. No need. I don't want any mementos. Becky stood still, confused. She murmured to herself, why? You used to like them. You said it yourself, that was before. I don't like them anymore. Her hands clenched, and she forced a bitter smile. So you don't like cufflinks, or is it that you don't like me? She looked directly into my eyes. Her expression a mixture of frustration and helplessness. Her voice, usually cold and sharp, now sounded hoarse, like she was holding back something deeper. Both, I answered honestly. She wasn't ready to give up. I'm leaving for France with Jake, and you're not even going to try to stop me? If you tell me not to go, I'll stay, I sighed deeply. Becky, we've been together for 3 years. You should know how I am by now. Her face crumpled, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She tilted her head in disbelief. She choked on her words. Pounding her chest as if trying to push something out, but nothing came. I'd heard that when people were in the greatest pain, they sometimes lose their voice. But I could never associate that kind of pain with Becky. She wasn't the type to break down like that. She leaned against the doorframe, a strange, vacant smile on her face. The smile faded, and she began to cry. Becky took a long time to compose herself, before laughing bitterly and pressing her hand to her chest. For so long, I thought I loved Jake, that with you it was just dependency. Even when I got together with you, it was because you looked a bit like him. But after the divorce, I realized I didn't love Jake at all. I loved you. I know, it's pathetic, but I can't help it. Becky, you're being irrational right now. There's no need to continue this conversation. I'll call Jake to pick you up. You should go back with him, I said, feeling exhausted by the scene. I could barely handle seeing a woman cry like this. It was tormenting to me. Don't. Becky jerked my hand away, snatched my phone from my grasp. Robert, if I had confessed earlier, if I had humbled myself and admitted my mistake sooner, do you think things would be different? No, I answered without hesitation, though it was the most painful thing to say. I've already told you this, Becky, I continued, my voice firm. Maybe I haven't addressed our relationship clearly enough before, but now I will. It's over. I don't love you anymore. The best thing for us is to forget each other. You and Jake go to France, and I'll start a new life. Becky's voice suddenly rose in anger. Do you think I haven't tried to forget you? Her lips trembled as she spread her arms wide, shaking her head. I can't do it. I want us to move on. 2. I don't want to keep dreaming about you every day, showing up like some crazy woman at your door. She stopped for a moment, biting back the raw emotion, then continued in a desperate whisper. But I can't. I came here to tell you how I feel, because what if there's a chance, even the smallest one, that you still care? What if you still love me? Robert, I've already missed one chance, I don't want to miss this one. Her phone rang suddenly, cutting her off. Becky glanced at the screen, then decisively hung up. Just a few seconds later, Selena arrived. Stepping off the elevator. When she saw Becky, she froze for a moment, before walking over and casually linking her arm with mine. What are you doing here to see Robert? Becky looked at us, her eyes narrowing with a sad smile. So, are you two dating now? What's it to you? Selena responded coolly. Becky, her resolve crumbling, glanced at me one last time. Jake wanted to take me to France yesterday. I turned him down. I came to see you, but I guess it's better if I hadn't. Her voice was flat. Almost as if she were recounting something trivial. But her eyes told another story. They gave away everything. Becky staggered toward the elevator, her back turned to us as she pressed the button. It's all my fault. I deserve it. The elevator doors closed, and as it ascended, she wiped away her tears, managing a small, shaky smile. Robert, I'm leaving now. It was the same way Shed said goodbye when Jake came to pick her up and move out. But this time, it felt different. I could hear it in her voice. She was really leaving. My heart, which had been locked tight for so long, finally loosened. I pulled Selena into my arms, holding her close. She was confused and patted my back. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I shook my head, a smile slowly forming on my lips. "Selena, thank you." The sky was clear and bright, sunlight streaming in through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor. And as I stood there, I realized if the future could stay as peaceful and serene as this, I would be content.